Hey there, Mr. Spore here, biology class. So this week, we're going to be talking about what is science. We're in a science class, right? And this often gets overlooked. Ask yourself, what is science? I was asked this question my junior year of college, and I was a science major, and I was in a classroom where nobody could really answer that question. It was one of my teachers that asked it. And they asked, what is science? And we were kind of stumped. Because we often think of science as being a thing. Is it this one class, or is it this one field of study? Is it geology? Is it biology? Is it any of the ologies? And really, what science is, and we're going to find this out this week, is science is a way to answer questions. That's what it is. It's a method. And so we're going to look at some of the questions that scientists ask, and then we're going to look at how they answer those questions. And it doesn't matter what discipline of science you're in, whether you're studying the weather, whether you're studying other planets, whether you're studying diseases like the coronavirus or cancer. We all, as scientists, use the same methodology. We all speak the same language. And so let's jump in and take a look at that. So in biology, some of the harder questions that we might ask would be, well, we're going to make a prediction here in a second. So a question we might ask is, do you think chickens could be descendants of dinosaurs, right? In other words, are they related? And we might assume or say, yeah, okay, they look related, but to be related means that somewhere back there you share a common ancestor, right? They didn't come directly from dinosaurs, just as you didn't come directly from your great-grandfather. There's a stepwise process to that, but you are related. So do you think chickens could be descendants of dinosaurs? We're going to have a worksheet with lesson 2, and we'll jump into this again there. But just looking at them, why might you think that they would be related in looking at them? What do they have in common? What are some features that they have in common? Looking at these two images, okay, they have scales on their legs. Both of them have scales on their legs. They have claws. Both have claws. Dinosaurs have teeth. Chickens don't. Chickens have beaks. Dinosaurs have scales. Chickens have feathers, but chickens also have scales. Other things they could have in common, they both lay eggs with the hard shell. And you would look at their bone and other skeletal features there to maybe ask that question. Gosh, it looks like they are related. Now, if you're wondering if they are related, what evidence might you need to support that claim that, okay, chickens are related to dinosaurs? That's the conclusion you come to. What evidence would you want to find in order to answer that question? These days, we can use things, sciencey things, like DNA. But what's another piece of evidence you might want to find? Scientists might look for and have looked for, and it might be something like this, a chickenosaurus. So you might look for something that has features of both, shared traits of both, that looks like that sort of missing link, that is that intermediate between the two. So here we have a dinosaur with feathers. It has a tail. Chickens don't have a tail. Dinosaurs do. Reptiles do. But it has feathers on it. It has wings, more like a chicken than arms. Still has teeth, right? So has characteristics of each. And we have found these throughout the fossil record, and we're finding more all the time. And they just kind of fit in the whole lineage between dinosaurs and chickens, right? We are talking about 64 million years since dinosaurs went extinct. And this process started even before that. So we're looking at, well over 100 million years of ancestry and evidence to look into there. So how do scientists answer questions? What do scientists use, right? How do we even answer this question? What is evidence? What kind of evidence can you use? Can't you use? And really the question becomes, what is real, right? What is actually something that's indisputable, that is just a hard fact? What are facts? How do we gather them? So we're going to look at that today. And I like this drawing here just because these people are arguing over whether this is a 6 or a 9. And some things can be left up to perception. And this is where we get into personal versus objective truths and things like that as well. And we'll talk about that later. So people might have the same piece of evidence, but see it in a different way. And we're going to get into that when we talk about theories. So we're going to look at what is evidence, what is real, what are facts here. Okay, so by definition, science, there's two definitions of science that I like. And this first one is by this astrophysicist, astronomer named Carl Sagan, who really designed our modern space program, worked with NASA throughout the 1970s. and 80s. I think he passed away in the 1980s. And he says, science is a way of thinking much more than it is a body of knowledge. And that's kind of one of my favorite quotes. Science is a way of thinking about the world. It's a way of answering questions. It is not the answers themselves. We get to the answers by using science, but it's not this big collection of facts. Science isn't just a bunch of textbooks. It is an actual method. A more technical definition for you, and start taking notes here, please. This would be this is the definition that we'll use in this class, the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Okay. So what are we studying, right? It's a systematic study. And what we study is the structure, what it is, and how it acts, and behavior of the physical and natural world, right? So the world around us that we can see and interact with. And how do we study it? We study it through observations, and then we do experiments as well. Scientists do experiments to test their ideas and see if they are disprovable. Okay. So throughout time, there's been different ways of knowing and understanding the world around us. And I'm going to go through a few of these with you guys. I like this stuff. It's kind of entry-level philosophy. Science and philosophy really are rooted in the same thing. The Greeks just kind of had the two together, and then we've separated them in modern times. So the first way that we know about things is intuition. And what I want you guys to do is just write down the term and then the definition here. I'll give you a few examples below. You don't need to write those down. So intuition is you just know, right? Whereas Bob Marley once said, who feels it knows it. You have a feeling and you're going to go with that, right? We call that instinct as well. And that works. That works in the world. That's what keeps us alive. That's what keeps most things alive, is we have these kind of built-in, pre-programmed intuitions that we run with. They're in our DNA, basically. And so examples of a good intuition, one that works for you, is you get the feeling that jumping off a cliff is a bad idea. You guys ever get up next to the edge of a cliff, stand there, and then just look straight over and feel totally comfortable? Anybody ever get really close to something high up? I've done a lot of rock climbing, and I tell you, if I haven't been doing it in a while, and I get up there, and I walk right to the edge, I get dizzy, and I need to crouch down. I need to get centered. My body is like, nope. And it takes a while to beat that out of me or to retrain myself. That's a normal, natural thing. That's your brain and body saying, you do not need to be here. This is not safe. Get back. So that's a good intuition. That's a good one that basically gives you some information that's usable in the world. Here's a bad example. You just know that all black cats are evil, and you're going to trap and eat them for meat. Okay, that's a weird one, granted. But the idea here is, well, that may work for you because you're ridding the world of evil. What about your neighbor that loves their black cat Fluffy? Okay? So while this may serve you, it doesn't really explain a truth about the world. It just explains your own personal truth. And actually, it makes a negative impact in the world. There are sometimes intuitions we have, biases, prejudices that we have that work for us, but in the larger scheme of things, don't work in the rest of the world or make the world a better place. The first one is a great example. It's going to keep you from falling off a cliff. The second one, not such a good example of an instinct you have, right? But people have had these throughout time, right? Something kind of weirds them out and creeps them out, and so they make up a story to explain that feeling, and that may not be the best thing. Okay, another way that we go about knowing things in the world. So intuition, instinct, gut feeling, go with it. Second one is authority. Authority is someone tells you, okay? Now, this works for us in many examples. A good example is your parents tell you when you're young to look both ways before you cross the street. They hold your hand. They kind of have you practice a bunch of times before you just run out there. This is them telling you this is important. You don't need to learn this. You don't really have an intuition because we didn't evolve with cars, right? Zipping by at 40 miles an hour. So we're not really programmed to be savvy about that. So our parents have to teach us, and that works. And authority works a lot of times with our parents and our community and our culture because they train us how to survive and do well in the world. Bad examples of authority would be the king takes your child and throws them in a volcano as a sacrifice to keep everyone safe. This has happened throughout time. Again, kind of a dark example, but, you know. such as my humor. This is not a good example of authority. This does not work for you. This does not work for your child. Okay? So this is one where the authority is going to say this is how it works and this is what needs to happen. And it may work for them, but it doesn't work for you. And it's really not informative of the world at all. It doesn't make the world a better place for everybody, right? And it's bad information, but it's coming from the top down. And we have operated this way. Humanity has operated this way time and again. Okay. Another way that we might know the world, know things about the world. First, we've got intuition, our gut feelings, just instincts. We've got authority, right? Wise people tell us things, right? Or maybe powerful people tell us things that benefit them. Another one would be experience. You figure it out for yourself. This seems good. Okay, this isn't a gut instinct. I'm going to test this out. So a good example is you grab a red hot pan off the stove, reach down and just grab it, and you burn your hand. Ow! You pull away after you've done it. Information. Red hot pans are not to be grabbed with your bare hands. Use an oven mitt, right? Or get some help. As a kid, I did this. I remember doing this as a kid. My grandma said, don't touch that burner. It was one of those curly-Q old electric burners, right, that was glow red. And she walked away with the pan she had on there to the sink, and I looked at her, and I looked down, and I was like, that's awesome. And I slapped my hand down on it, and it burned really bad, you know. And I pulled off, and I screamed, just put my hand in the sink and asked me why I did it. And I was like, I don't know. I knew why, because it looked cool, and I wanted to touch it, because I was dumb. But I learned from that experience, okay? That works. That's good information. I've used that throughout my entire life. Bad example. Here we go. I am from another planet. I'm an alien from a planet, and that planet is linoleum. All it has is flat tile linoleum floors, and everything's smooth and slick like here in school. Now, I come down to planet Earth, and I go and I step on carpet. But I step on the edge of the carpet, right where it meets the linoleum, and one of those little carpet tacks that's in there stabs me in the foot. You guys ever do that? Step on one of those carpet tacks around the edge? Hurts. Hurts your soul. It's a little tiny tack. Goes up into your brain. Whew, I jump backwards. Ah! I've learned all carpets are bad and they should be avoided at all costs, right? Wrong. What's the difference between these two examples? Between experience, all red hot pans should not be grabbed because they're going to burn you, and all carpets are sharp and should be avoided. Right? This one is accurate. I learned something. I don't need to do that one time. I don't need to go touching a bunch of red hot burners. So why is this one wrong? Why is this one incorrect about the world? Why is my experience not really telling me what's really going on in the second case, but is in the first place? So think about that for a second. Experience is a great way to go about learning about the world, but it can often be inaccurate if you take a single experience as representative of all possible experiences. And this is where science comes in. Science is, again, the systematic study, right, of the structure and function, the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experimentation. Systematic study. We observe, and then we experiment. Now, I could say that's true of this, but what I haven't done is I haven't really studied it systematically. I've experienced it one time. So how is science different from experience? What could you do to each of these examples from experience to test them, maybe? What word in the above definition makes it different from others? So what makes science different from all of these others? And it's the term study, systematic study, if you will. So science uses the scientific method. This is how we systematically study things. This is how I am going to come to a conclusion about one experience versus another that will be accurate about the world. Because now I'm going to actually go and test and repeat it. It's not just going to be a one-time experience. But many people have one-time experiences and then go around telling everybody about it like that is how it absolutely is. I went to this restaurant and blah, blah, blah. This meal wasn't cooked and it's a terrible restaurant, blah, blah. It's based on one meal. Right? It's based on that one plate that came out of that kitchen. And who knows what's going on around that. It could be the best restaurant in the world if you tested it a bunch of times. And then you're going to post that on Yelp. Okay, so onwards with science. This guy has nothing to do with science, but I like his vibe and the way that he rolls through life. I have a unicorn. He has a white horse. It's pretty similar. Let's keep going with this. All right, so there's 6 steps to the scientific method. Okay, 6 steps to this method about how we know things about the world. Let's back it all the way up to the beginning again. Science is about asking questions. That's what science is. It's a way to ask questions about the world. It's not the answers. The answers are independent. The answers are just things. But it's about how we get to those answers. It's the system of getting there. And that separates it from a gut feeling or from someone else telling me, hey, the answer is this. Or from me going and experiencing it one time. Now we're going to really systematically study it and come up with some way of understanding it in the whole world, not just in our own. Okay, so there's different methods, steps to the scientific method. You could look up any, Google image search of scientific method steps or the 6 steps. Sometimes there's 7, depends how people divide it, but it basically goes in the same order. These people left out observation. That annoys me. So it starts with an observation and then a question. You ask a question. Science is all about how do we answer questions. So first we got to ask the question, and then we get into the actual science part. This part, observe question, is what people do and have always done. We've always made observations and asked questions. That's human nature, if you will. And I would say that many other animals do that have a brain as well. But what we do is we then form a hypothesis and we test it. So 6 steps to the scientific method. If we were in class, I would have you guess along with me. But the first one will be make an observation. Write these down. You need to know these. And the next one is ask a question. I think, honestly, like these 2 are so important in this order. Make an observation, ask a question. Science is about observing things, seeing things, and then wondering about how it is that they came to be or how they operate, right? It's the study of the structure, what they are, what is this? This is a cup, and then how did it get here? Who made this? What is it made of, right? When was it made? All of those things are facts in the world that we could find out about. So ask those questions and then propose a hypothesis. A hypothesis is best defined as these 2 words, untested, explanation. I don't like educated guess, and you are told that, and I just don't like it because it's not a guess. It's an attempt at an explanation, but it's not been tested. So it's your best explanation. It's not just a wild guess. It's I think it's this. I think it's this because you haven't tested it yet. That's all you got. Okay, so that's good. Right? So you're narrowing it down in your head and you're thinking, based on these things I'm seeing, I think the answer is probably this. This is where we get confused with theory. I could cover the word hypo here and you'd get thesis, which is theory. And we're going to get to this later, but hypo literally means below. Hypothermic, below. Hypodermic, below the skin. Hypothesis, below a theory, because it's not tested. So it's an explanation that has not been tested. Make an observation. What is going on here? Or I see this, ask a question, why am I seeing this? What is causing this? And then I think it might be this, and then we're going to get to that. So historically, one of the great examples of the scientific method in action is Galileo, Copernicus, Galileo. Galileo published the book, and he was an astronomer in the 1500s, and this is during the scientific revolution, and we could jump into all kinds of fun stuff. I think it's super fascinating time. But scientific revolution comes about, it's also during the Renaissance. It's during this like rejuvenation of civilization during the 1500s, coming out of a lot of wars in the Dark Ages and the rebuilding of civilization and technology. And with that comes about a interest again in philosophy and mathematics and some of the older sciences from the times of the Greeks, and the inventions of things, telescopes, microscopes. And so Galileo has a telescope, and if you see here, he has a little compass on there where he can actually measure angles, and he starts plotting and mapping the rotations of the stars and the planets and the movement of the planets around the sun, which at the time people thought that everything rotated around the Earth. So here's an early model of that, a drawing of the Earth being the center. Galileo makes observations and he asks a question. And his question is, do all the stars really rotate around the Earth? Right? Does the sun and everything move around the Earth and we're still? Or do we move around something else? It or something else? So he comes up with a hypothesis, an explanation, and his hypothesis based on his observations so far is that we rotate around the sun. And he then tests it and does experiments. And so he plots this out. He draws these out. He does a lot of geometry, trigonometry, I guess, on these. And he writes an entire book. He analyzes his data, and then he comes to a conclusion and communicates his results. And if you look down here at this image, this we can do now, this bottom image right here. This is done using a time lapse. So you set a camera on a tripod and you just open up the shutter and you let it just have a long exposure, hours and hours and hours. It's not moving, so nothing else shakes. So everything around it is still, but the stars are moving. Right? We can do this now. Galileo had to do this with pencil and paper. He literally had to draw the star and then half an hour later, measure where it is and then plot it there and then draw lines connecting them all and seeing how they move. So he was able to draw a map like this, or a map such as we see captured in this photograph here. And from his observations, man, it sure looks like we are all rotating around something else, right? Not everything is rotating around us, but we are just in this rotational sphere with everything else. We are on the outside. We are not in the middle. And, okay, here's an even better image of it. So an observation might be, what's the point of rotation here? Well, it looks like the point of rotation is over here. So question, do all the stars really revolve around the Earth, or does the Earth and all the other planets and stars rotate around something else? That's the simple question that Galileo asked, right? And then he makes his observations and he publishes this book, Dialogue Concerning Two Chief World Systems, 1632. And he gets arrested and gets thrown in jail and then later put under house arrest. And this book is banned, and you'll get arrested if you are seen with it or selling it or anything else, because it calls into question what the authorities have said for a long time. So now we'll go back to ways of knowing. Instinct, intuition, I just feel it. That'll get you by day to day, you know, eating twigs and leaves and avoiding falling off cliffs. But in a bigger society, we have bigger problems. So then we go to authority. The wise people know it. But in this case, the wise people had one thing to say, and Galileo discovered another, because it didn't stop at authority. It didn't even stop at experience. He went to the scientific method. He gathered evidence. Right? He made an observation. He asked a question. He proposed a hypothesis. And then he gathered a bunch of evidence, tested, he analyzed it, and he came to his conclusion based on the evidence alone. This leads us to the next part then. So now we have the scientific method, right? The way of understanding the world, the way of answering questions. He asked a question, do all the stars rotate around the Earth? Well, according to this, it sure looks like, right? The Earth rotates around, he drew the sun very small here, the sun. Summer, equinox, winter, fall equinox, summer again, or spring, and summer again here. We rotate around the sun. He made that conclusion after looking at all the evidence, scientific method, right? Conclusions come last. So this gets us to the next part, and this is really important, sort of fundamental one that we need to understand, is what is a theory? What is the difference between a theory and a hypothesis? So I just talked about this a minute ago, kind of gave it away. So root words, right? You'll see this term, hypo means below, hyper means above. So thesis means theory, hypotheory. A hypothesis is less than a theory. People will often say in layman's terms, oh, well, that's just his theory. He's not sure. No. That would be the hypothesis, right? That's your explanation that you haven't really tested out yet. So the difference is this. A hypothesis is an untested explanation. And write this down. You guys need to know this one. Hypo means under, thesis means theory. A theory is an explanation that has been tested and is supported by evidence and facts. Theories explain how something happens. Okay? Laws explain exactly what will happen, and there are a few laws. But theories explain how, really specifically. And these two things work together in science, right? So, theories and facts. Theories are explanations that are tested and supported by evidence and facts. A theory is an explanation of the facts. And there's lots of different theories that explain lots of different facts, okay? And throughout time, science has been publishing different books based on evidence. Scientists go and gather evidence, as much evidence as they can, and then they come up with a theory that explains all that evidence. And a theory, the better the explanation of all the facts, the more sense it makes of all the facts. It doesn't leave facts out. It doesn't explain just half of them. It should explain almost all of them together, and that they all make sense cohesively. It's like putting a puzzle together in a way that best fits. Now, new facts can come in, and that can change up a theory. Usually it modifies it. Every now and then it changes it up. And here's some examples of great scientific sort of works throughout time. Right? Science really started in the 1500s, and in the 1600s, Galileo publishes his book on what he calls, what did he call that exactly? Dialogue Concerning Two Chief Worlds, right? So talking about where the Earth sits in the rotation of the planets and stars in our solar systems. He publishes that. That's it. His theory is the explanation of all of that. Carl Linnaeus comes up with his systems of nature, showing that different groups of living things are related based on physical characteristics, and he puts things into different groups, right? So horses are horses, cats are cats, dogs are dogs, mushrooms are mushrooms, pines are pines, grasses are grasses, orchids are orchids, right? Primates are primates, apes are apes. We classify living things based on groups, and those show relation to each other. Grasses are related to each other, on and on and on. In the 1800s, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, well, in the 1700s, he invents the microscope, but then later on in the 1800s, his observations are used to come up with the idea that all living things are made of cells. It's called cell theory. And it's an explanation for how all living things are made of cells and share these things in common with each other. When you look at all these facts, right, cell theory, that all cells arise from pre-existing cells, DNA in the cells controls the function of structure and function of things, on and on. In the 1800s, Principles of Geology, this book right here, is published. Charles Lyell, it's the first geology book ever written. It was in 1829, 28, maybe 30, that it was published. And, right, it's just a huge groundwork laying out the 3 different rock types that there are, how rocks are formed, how mountains are formed. And this is pre-plate tectonics, so he gets a lot of stuff wrong in here, but he gets most of it right? And we keep building on that with more facts. And more facts come in, and then we're able to add to that. Now we have the theory of plate tectonics, that the Earth is made up of these different plates. And then Charles Darwin, right, publishes in 1858 The Origin of Species, talking about how not just that living things are related, because Linnaeus did this here. Darwin comes up that living things descend from one another, groups of living things, and branch off and evolve over time and change, right? That all life evolves over time. Populations of living things evolve over time, and that we can look back and see that all living things are related, and we can see the origins of living things as well. That's why he calls it the origin of species, where they originated from. And that was his big thing. And really, as far as biology goes, right, so we've got Linnaeus's book here on classification, which we still use today. The idea that living things are made of cells is groundwork of everything in medicine today that we know, right, based on observable facts. And then Darwin's Origin of Species, again, is based on all the observable facts that we have today about structure, and also then with DNA, that living things are related and that groups of living things evolve over time. We use that in medicine all the time when we're developing vaccines and other things as well to treat living things that are attacking us. Okay, wrapping this up. That's just a theory, not a fact, man. So people will say this, and this is just, you can't say it. That's like saying those are words, not numbers. Well, yeah, they are 2 different things, right? So you can't make words out of numbers. Yes, you're right, you can't, right? So that's true. Right? That's just a theory, not a fact, though. That's not a real thing. That's just a theory, not a fact. Facts support theories. Theories are explanations of facts. So facts are never theories, and theories never become facts. Letters are never numbers. Numbers are never letters. So yes, right. You can't make words out of numbers. Yeah, true. Okay, so just a theory, not a fact. No, it's not just a theory. A theory is an explanations of facts. So it doesn't mean that a theory then becomes a fact. Facts support theories. And here's an example of that I can give you. I have a pen right here. I'm going to drop this pen. Okay, what's going to happen when I drop this pen? Where'd it go? It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Or is it going to stay here? Goes down. Goes down. I can keep doing this again and again. Now I'm actually testing something. What's the fact? What's the fact here? Now, some of you might say gravity, but that's not the fact. The fact is that it's falling. Again and again. What's another fact? Something we could measure here. What's something we could measure here with this? I could measure what? How fast it falls? How long it takes it to fall? I can measure it each time. How high I'm dropping it from versus how long it takes it to fall versus how fast it falls. Those are all facts. And we can measure each one of those facts and test it again and again and again. Now I have a whole ton of facts. What's the explanation for why those facts all add up and that is happening? That's the theory of gravity. Gravity is the explanation for the series of facts. I can measure the mass of this pen versus the mass of the Earth, right? And then those two would explain. So if I drop this on Jupiter, where Jupiter is bigger, it would fall at a faster rate. But it would be proportional to the mass of each object, and I could calculate that. The theory of gravity explains all of that and makes sense of all of that. So theories are explanations of the facts. What's the theory that explains them? Gravity. So here's a fact. The Earth rotates around the sun at 18.5 miles per second. Theory of gravity also explains that. It explains why we rotate at the rates that we do, spin at the rates we spin. The theory of gravity will never become a fact. Facts are used to develop the theory of gravity. Theory of gravity explains the facts that we see around us. That's the way science works. Saying that's just a theory, not a fact to a scientist hurts our brains, because what you're saying doesn't make any sense, right? You are basically saying that is a frog, not a river. And I'm saying, yes. Doesn't make any sense what you just said to me. So, lesson 1, let's back this up. So go all the way back to the beginning. I have a wonderfully made What is Science review sheet here. What is the definition of the thing we call science? That would be the part where I ask you to start taking notes. And right here, 5. The systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experimentation. I have this so well there. And then I talk about the different ways of knowing, and I give you some examples, and I want you to find out which one of these is best matched to that example that I have given to you. So we've got intuition, authority, experience, and science. Match those up to the examples that I give you here. I have an article linked here that I want you to look at. And it's a short one, and it talks about this failure to toast example. And I want you to explain the scientific method as a cycle more than a straight line in here. Because again, it just keeps repeating itself. Once we come up with an explanation, then we make the next observation and ask the next question. How is the scientific method different from experience? So this is kind of you having to kind of summarize much of the information that we covered in here. I'm sure you could do it. Again, just a few basic things that we covered today, right? What is science? Science is a way of answering questions. We make observations, we ask questions. How do we answer them? Then we come up with the next 4. Make a hypothesis, an untested explanation. Test your explanation. Analyze your results. Look at your data. And then come to a conclusion. And then communicate that to the rest of the world so people can actually see that what you did is accurate and real. That's simple, right? We look at facts. And when we get a bunch of facts that we've looked at, then we come up with an explanation. And that's a theory. Scientists use theories all the time. We have the theory of gravity, right? Einstein's theory of relativity. We have atomic theory, right? So, lots of different theories out there which are explanations of facts. Facts don't become theories. Theories explain facts. Boom! That's it. That's science in a nutshell. It's pretty simple, but it's pretty rad. And it enables us to then start to ask bigger questions and come up with answers and have parameters for how we answer those questions. So much of what gets lost in the scientific debate is people start bringing in things that are not facts, or people start proposing theories that aren't based on facts, right? Then it's not a theory, right? Or people confuse a hypothesis with a theory. So I wanted to straighten all that out before we get into our next unit and our next section, which will be talking about evolution, right? Darwin's idea that populations of living things change over time, and that's been observed. So then we're going to talk about what evidence do we have of that in the now and over long periods of geologic time. What does it show us? What does it say about life here on Earth and other planets? It's all really awesome stuff. But we need to have a vocabulary to work with before we get there, right? So, boom, that's it. That's this week. Do this first worksheet. I have a second worksheet, which I'm going to shoot another video for right now. And I know I kind of rambled here, but this is fun and interesting stuff, and I hope you enjoyed it. And my unicorn sweater. Unicorn, yeah. Laters.